What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 27 of Destination, the show. Here for an exciting episode with Jeremy Nygaard, as usual. Jeremy, what's up? How are you?
I'm good. I'm busy. I'm good. We'll talk more about what's so busy here shortly, I'm sure.
Okay. And also want to welcome Theo Tollefson, who's joining us for our Twins discussion. Theo, how are you, man?
Doing just okay. I'm looking forward to what we got going ahead of us.
Yes, sir. Okay, let's dig in some quick housekeeping stuff. Want to make sure folks know where they can find and support the show. So you can find us. We have an emerging YouTube channel at Destination the Show. You can find us on Twitter at DTS_pod1. And wherever you get your podcasts, you can support the show by downloading episodes, liking and subscribing, interacting with our content as often as possible. Fellas, spring training is up and running. In fact, I think we're roughly halfway through.
Just about, yeah.
How do you guys like spring training? How are you feeling about it? Paying a lot of attention, not much attention at all? Any strong opinions?
Who do you want to start?
Catching casually. I mean, it's just news and notes. They don't have games broadcasted, and since the games are still in Bali, I mean, we have our blackout problems even just to watch it. So on weekends, you have something nice to put on the radio, but otherwise, it's really just trying to pay attention to who's healthy, who's hurt. Then we have something to write about.
Yeah, I think in a typical year, I would pay way more attention and try to watch the games, even if they're broadcast on other networks, right? But Bally's does make it hard to watch, and there hasn't been one on there yet. Not a typical year for me. Like I mentioned before, I'm following along on a journey that my daughter's on as a senior. For the first time in school history, I haven't even told you guys yet. First time in school history, I made it to the state tournament. They beat a 27-0 team on Saturday, and qualified. So we've spent the better part of the last 3 days trying to prepare ourselves and get things going. And my wife's been doing a lot and sending me different places to pick stuff up. So we're gonna take off. We're gonna take off for Green Bay tomorrow night and play a state semifinal game at 1:35 on Thursday afternoon. Only public school that qualified in our division, 3 private schools. So
congrats.
The work is cut out, but it's been a fun ride. So I haven't transitioned from basketball yet, even though it's typically time that I transition. So that's kind of what I have going on, and that's why we're recording this tonight, not tomorrow night.
Theo, if I've not heard a more loaded statement in my entire life than my wife is sending me places, long pregnant pause.
Yeah,
incredible.
We're getting things done.
Right on. We'll leave it at that. I have a spring training take. I hate spring training. I hate it. It's boring. I can't stand it. None of the games have been on TV. The only thing I'm sweating is injuries, and I'm just ready. I'm ready to start. It's unusually warm this winter. It feels like baseball should be up and running, so it is a struggle to realize that we're 25 days away from opening day, something like that.
23.
Do you also, Jamie, like hate like the meal before the dessert and the things that go into the work before the reward? Like, are you just like, let's open the presents, let's get to the fun stuff?
I realize
all the required stuff.
I realize this is like very Grinchy. I just don't take a lot of joy in spring training. Everyone is excited about someone who is added, like including me, by the way, because there's nothing else to talk about. 1 mile an hour of velocity on their fastball and like a 12 pitch sample, a new pitch here or there, and I don't know. Yeah,
you did say last week that you've never been to spring training, right?
That's true. I feel like it's a complete game changer if you're there.
Yes, it's like I remember the first year I went and watching the pitchers do PFP, and I was like, yeah, there we go.
That sounds amazing.
It's cool. I mean, you see the guys on the backfields, you see them walking around. They're just trying to get back into the swing of things. I think once you do that, you just have a new appreciation for it, even though you know that it's not like it's not NFL training camp, right? It's not grueling. But it's fun, and it's a fun experience. If you haven't been down there and you're considering it, yeah, certainly do it.
For sure. I will tell you one thing quickly that's bringing me a lot of joy, and that is the Twins player development Twitter account that has been tweeting out a lot of great content. And in particular, what caught my eye, I'm sure you both saw it, was Walker Jenkins versus Charlie Soto at bats a couple of days ago, which was pretty exciting. Finally getting around to seeing those guys play in their first full season. Okay, so just to pull back the curtain a little bit before we move on to this next thing, I usually put together like an overview, right? Or like a rough outline or plan for our shows. And today, when I open it up, I'm confronted with this bullet point. Here's what it says. I'm just going to read it, and then you guys can explain what is going on. It says drunken race chat on Gleeman and the Geek led to conversation from ranting on first pitches, and if John or Aaron had done it. You guys, what am I missing? I'm clearly behind on podcasts. What is going on? How does this involve one of the three of us? It's definitely not me.
Well, I was listening to Big Brother podcast, Gleaming the Geek, as I was in Albert Lee today, and I had plenty of drive time. So, as John and Aaron usually do, they got on a rant on something. So, yes, first pitch rant was the thing they ranted about, and then they brought up a time they did the light rail pub crawl, which led to a few people who were in that pub crawl being in the mascot race. I was too young at that time to be a part of this shenanigans, but Jeremy, you were not.
No, John signed me up for a few things over the course of the last 10 years. Before I talk about that race, he had me do a canoe race at the Saints game, which I almost fell over and lost. So that did happen. But I think part of the reason that he had me do that is because back in 2016 or 17? Which year was it? 2016, Theo?
What?
I think 2016.
2016.
I think I thought I said it.
We did the pub crawl, and it was me and Brock and Nick and John and Dave, someone from Minpost, and
Campbell.
I'm not sure who it was. Maybe not. But anyway, I was just kind of a throw-in, and leading up to the event. So the backstory is that we had homecoming football at my high school the night before. We won, comeback, huge win, celebrated the victory till like 2 a.m. I was up watching my daughter play softball by like 8 a.m. the next morning. Then went to the pub crawl. Did all the stops, did all the good stuff. We get to the game. I put on the suit, and I kicked their butts.
Wait. So I'm sorry. I'm just stuck on the line where you said you were a throw-in, because I feel like that would be a great title for this episode. Jeremy's a throw-in. We can.
Well, I mean, it was
life.
It's you tell me how this works. It's John, it's Brock, it's Nick, it's Jeremy. Like there's like Seth wasn't gonna do it. Seth wasn't there, right? Parker probably, I don't know. Parker was, I think, getting drinks from Glenn Perkins. That might have been the year before. But I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I hadn't really, turned on the Jets for a couple years, but I feel like I was good enough. Theo has footage, so
you were kind enough to share this with me. So just remind me, who is which mascot?
Yeah, talk us through what you're seeing, Jeremy, because no one else can see this.
So John's the guy that started early and then was sent back. He started early. He's also one that cuts the corner. I think Brock was the guy in blue. I took the green one because it was the smallest. I figured that was that I had the best chance. So my mom was recording from my season tickets. I'm like, I'll be the guy looking at you. See, I'm the guy staring. And then there I go. So I get in front of John, and then Nick is the other one there. He's the one in green. And then I just turned on my
oh my God, you're absolutely dusting everybody.
I know. And then I said, watch me, I'll be the guy that does the Dion shuffle at the end.
Oh God.
So you only see the tail end because like,
your mom
like, get off the field. And that was it. Like, and then everybody had an excuse. Brock was the bullseye. And they were like, well, you only won because you didn't drink as much as the rest of us, which I don't think that's necessarily true. But I mean, I wasn't counting all day. I ran. It wasn't straight, right? You have to turn. So I feel like it was a natural thing. And yeah, so I don't know exactly what they said about me. As long as it was Jeremy as the champion, then I think they
That's
had
pretty
that.
much it. They were making more fun of John looking like what's her face from Willy Wonka, the one who blows up like a blueberry.
Oh yeah.
Veruca
Yeah.
Salt?
No, I think Veruca was the goose.
I don't know, but John also cut the corner and still couldn't make up the room. So, and he did leave early. You saw him like they're like, no, get back. We didn't actually start yet. Also,
Sounds like
I
good luck, John.
believe, and I may have this wrong, that win wrapped up the season series for the one that I was dressed up as.
Wow.
That was the.
So it was
clincher.
high stakes. It wasn't just like a regular mascot race. Like there was something on the line.
Yeah. So because I kicked John's butt, then he made me do the canoe thing at the Saints game, and I got done, and my wife was like, "That was embarrassing." And I'm like, "I almost flew over. Like, who does this?" Nate Palmer did that one too. He fared much better than I did. So if you ever do well in one of their shenanigans, then they'll try to knock you down a rung the next time they have the opportunity.
Right on. Okay.
Got
So you were a throw-in and you proved everybody wrong, man. What a way to start the show.
Yeah. And now I'm running again because just in case they throw me into one of these races, I need to be able to retake my spot atop the mascot.
Defend your title. That's
yeah.
Even though we got younger blood here, that could maybe surpass both of you.
Is that a challenge? I feel like
Maybe.
Just let's get
All
True
right.
Blood on it too.
Yeah, True Blood. John can get this organized. We'll do a mascot race this year.
Okay.
I'm in.
Right on. Well, I am excited to see / participate in that. Jeremy, I'm not sure. I believe that you had that turn of pace in you. And that's the nicest thing I will ever say about you on the show. All right, let's move on. So that was very fun. Thanks for grabbing that. Okay, so today we're going to talk Twins top 20. We have talked about the Brewers and the Cubs in back-to-back weeks. Going to dig into kind of dueling Twins top 20 prospect lists here. Theo and Jeremy and I have all procured our own individual top 20s. We'll go through them. We'll kind of read them off, talk about points of agreement, disagreement, really try and dig in on some guys, and just dig as deep as we can into this system, especially now we're kind of on the cusp of minor league baseball and seeing footage from spring starting to circulate and starting to come out. So the way I organize these is Theo's person, because he's on less frequently. So his person's going to be listed first. Then Jeremy's, then mine. And we'll just chop it up with some questions along the way. And I think we know the Twin system like relatively well, right? So this first kind of cluster of picks at the top, I think we're going to be pretty aligned. But I've still prepared some outrageous statements for you guys to finish, potentially. So number one, consensus overall prospect, unsurprisingly, is Walker Jenkins, number 5 overall pick in the 2023 draft. We all had him at number 1. Don't think there's much debate there after the strong debut last year. So here's my question for you guys. This time next year, Walker Jenkins will be ranked the number what overall prospect in baseball? Anyone want to take that first?
I'd say 1 or 2. It's very dependent.
Ooh.
It's very dependent on how Ethan Salas, whose older brother Jose Salas has definitely dropped off all our lists, performs this season. And a lot of the guys on the consensus top 10s are probably going to be making their MLB debuts this next year. So, and Jenkins and Salas are like the 2 who will not be. So I think it's fair to say, if all goes well, 3rd at worst, like 3rd at the very worst.
At worst.
Wow.
Clip it, Jeremy. Clip it.
That's
coming in hot.
That's a ballsy take. So my take was a little more on the funny end, and I think that Walker Jenkins is a really, really, really nice prospect. So I said he's going to rank somewhere between 6th and 9th, and I picked 7th. That look on your face, that's the look I needed. 7th overall.
So insufferable. All right, Jeremy, because you chose such an annoying answer, I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
Walker Jenkins ends the 2024 season at what minor league level?
Ends this season?
Ends this season. Yep.
Double A.
Oof. Okay.
I have the same
Theo?
answer. Double A.
Yeah.
Double A. Confident. We're a confident bunch.
Yeah, I don't think he gets a ton of at bats at Double A. I don't think he spends a ton of time there. But I think he'll get to Double A. That's my final answer. But now let's hear what you have to say about this, because we got one or two, three at worst. I say 6th to 9th.
Yep. I'm with Theo on this one 100%. I'm going to go 1 through 3. There was a really interesting Twitter discussion this week, right? Where basically the gist was Wyatt Langford, right, is getting steam for potentially breaking camp with the Rangers. And so how would you redraft the vaunted 2023 top 5? And I think my answer to that is Wyatt Langford number 1. And this is where I'm going to get spicy. Walker Jenkins number 2. Dylan Cruz number 3. Paul Skeens number 4. And Max Clark number 5.
Why you're just gonna take Skeens and just discard him?
I've stated on this show before that I don't even think Paul Skeens was the best pitching prospect in that draft class. So yeah, that's definitely not surprising. But I agree with Theo. I think 1 through 3 makes a lot of sense. I do think finishing at Double A makes a ton of sense. Jenkins was rocking a 92% end zone contact rate in his sample in the minors last year. He was absolutely crushing the baseball. I feel pretty confident.
I just feel like there's going to be guys that kind of like Gunnar Henderson wasn't just a name that was at 6 and then boom 1. Like he was lower, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Salas has always been kind of high. Ethan Holiday wasn't 3 to 1. He was like
Jackson Holiday.
Yeah. Well, Ethan Holiday is going to be one.
He's going to be drafted in the Dallas list.
But I mean, it's the same thing. Like these guys come from 60 to 1. And so I think there's just going to be other guys. Jenkins he's not going to sneak up on anybody, right? The expectations are super high.
Right.
I think there'll just be a handful of guys that show up, and it might be Walker Jenkins is 5 here and 7 there and 3 there.
Right.
But yeah, I think that a lot of things can happen, but a top 10 global prospect is pretty impressive.
Yep. And to Theo's point, right? Walker Jenkins could be in the top 7 pretty much from graduations of guys ahead of him that are still on the list. He's going to bump up a bunch of spots. And what is he right now? In the 13 to 20 range on most lists. So it's not as if we're predicting some outlandish jump. I think this is saying if he's healthy and he continues to perform consistently and he bests high A in his 2024 season, that's a realistically the floor is top 10 by the end of 2024, in my opinion.
Fair. Totally fair.
Yeah, I think he'll reach Double A probably by beginning of August if all is going as well, and then that's also dependent on Emmanuel Rodriguez's performance in Double A, which we'll get around to later. But I think that's the trajectory that I'm currently seeing for his 2024 season. And some of the guys ahead of him, and I have MLB.com's top 100 list up, like Evan Carter, he's going to get close to 100 plate appearances and graduate off that list by the end of April. So that will move him up to 9. So,
yep, 100%. Okay, fairly aligned there. We are going to spend a little bit of time digging into number 2 and number 3 guys on this list, even though we're aligned on all of them. So number 2, unsurprisingly, I think we all had, I'm going to call him infielder Brooks Lee. Finished the 2023 season at AAA. Has got plenty of run in spring training and has looked pretty good in spring training early on. So here's my question for you guys to jump us off here. Do y'all think so? Brooks Lee is often talked about as this high floored prospect, right? Because he has a well-rounded tool set. The hit is good. The power is solid. He's solid defensively, so on and so forth. And people talk about him as not necessarily having a carrying tool. So do you think this high floor label is a little unfair do you think that's kind of overlooking how impactful he might be at the major league level, even as soon as 2024?
I don't. And I think part of that has to do with he's still being represented pretty well in on these lists, right? MLB has him top 20. I think everywhere has him top 40. Like overall, we're talking a top 30, top 40 global prospect, right? And when we look at the last prospect that the Twins had that kind of came out of that range and then took the major league and the playoffs by storm, like it's not overlooking a guy when you're not necessarily sure how he's going to pan out, but you're pretty sure he's going to be there. And we didn't know what Royce Lewis was going to be, and now we've seen what Royce Lewis kind of is, and it's like, wow, is Brooks Lee going to be Royce Lewis? He's not going to be that dynamic athlete. But I think it's not that that he's being overlooked. It's that he's going to be everyone's pretty sure he's going to be a major league player. We just don't know if he's going to be an all-star or if he's going to be a first division regular, how long it's going to take him to get there, where he settles in defensively. There's a lot of questions, but not necessarily questions about whether he's going to be a major league baseball player. And I think that's why he's ranked where he's ranked. He just doesn't have those flashy tools that get you noticed like Buxton did, like Royce Lewis did. Obviously the injuries. But he'd be the number one prospect in baseball if the Twins don't jump, or the number one prospect in their system if the Twins don't jump all the way up in the lottery.
Yep. Theo, how about you, man? What are your thoughts?
No, I think it's just finding him a defensive home, which I think he'll be shuffled around in St. Paul at least during the month of April, just getting steady on where he will see his role fill in. And obviously with injuries that will likely happen between now and what I believe to be his ideal call-up date would be right around Memorial Day weekend. There will be an opportunity for him in the majors by then, and he will be making his major league debut. It's just we don't know how that's going to shake up. And I'm excited to see him in St. Paul the first weekend. I mean, just with how the roster shaked up with acquiring Margot, I just don't see him making the opening day roster. So I'm hoping to get an interview with him while I'm there for that first weekend. But yeah. It'll be exciting to see. But you, Jamie, you have the most like in-depth thing here of you went a few weeks back and just looked at his splits from each side of the plate. So I think we should really go into that because you did your homework on that and really showed here's where he needs to show his growth to really get more to that all-star level versus where he currently sits in this. I don't know if purgatory is the right word, but just uncertainty.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I wrote about this at Twins Daily a little bit before spring was kicking off. Just was digging around with some additional access to like advanced AAA data, which was exciting. And I got down a rabbit hole on Brooks Lee. And one thing jumped out, right, which is that, hey, Jeremy's gone blurry. Something jumped out, which was that Lee, who's a switch hitter, the commentary has always been that he's been better, or his swing looks a little better from the left-hand side of the plate. So I was like, okay, let's just look up splits. It's really stark, his performance in 2023 splits-wise as a left-handed hitter and as a right-handed hitter. So let me quickly roll through some numbers. Average exit velocity as a lefty, 91.3 miles per hour, elite for AAA. As a righty, 87.4. Percentage of batted ball events that were hit 95 miles per hour plus. As a lefty, 52.9%, and as a righty, 26.1. Contact percentage, 78.2% as a lefty, 68.7 as a righty. Expected slugging as a lefty, 531, massive. As a righty, 203. So it was a limited sample against righties. He didn't get a ton of plate appearances, as a right-handed hitter, but like those splits really jumped out to me. And I saw recently, maybe a week or so ago, Do Young Park, Twins reporter for MLB.com, had a piece out about how something Lee had been working on this offseason has been his approach and his swing and refining his swing mechanics from the right side of the plate. So I think something to monitor early on in his St. Paul days. Theo, I agree with you for sure. I don't think there's a spot coming out of spring training, but I also agree that he's kind of like first on the list to be called up. But watch how he's doing as a righty, because if he improves there, I mean, some of his left-handed swings in spring training early have looked really, really nice.
So does it hurt his chances to break the lineup because he would most ideally fit in as a platoon guy, but Julian and Kirilov are kind of already in those spots, right? I mean, the stuff that I see that suggests that maybe he's best suited for second base and Julian's best suited at first base.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, right? But there's just the numbers kind of don't crunch in his favor.
For sure, except that he's the strong side of the platoon. So, like, how often are you going to be facing lefty starters? Yes, there's a bullpen advantage. I guess like maybe that's the thing that's being monitored closely at AAA, right? Is like, is this performance as a right-handed hitter going to turn a corner to the point where we feel really, really comfortable and confident with him as kind of an everyday player? I don't necessarily think it hurts too much. Like, to put it into context, his like numbers as a lefty were like pretty outstanding for a AAA hitter. Again, that's like a relatively limited sample size, but I don't think it's much going to affect where they place him or how they think of his playing time when he gets to the majors, personally.
No, I agree with that. It's all going to play itself out, and I think what people need to watch, especially if you're going to Saints games in the early part of the season in April and braving the somewhat cold weather we'll probably be having at that point, just watch how he's swinging from the right side of the plate, and he's going to have more opportunities against lefties. And plus,
For
it's
sure,
a hitter's haven at CHS Field, so him and everyone else there is going to be raking, even in the cold weather.
Yo, speaking of a hitter's haven, have you guys seen that promotion the Saints? This is a sidebar, but have you seen the promotion the Saints do where it's like a fire pit in the outfield and they give you like s'more stuff as you go in?
Oh,
we
yeah.
thought that was going to be really, really great, but then John Singleton started mashing home runs and it almost hit my like 5-year-old in the head at like 100 miles an hour in the outfield. It was dangerous out there, man.
How are the scores though?
The s'mores
How
were
are the
really good. Really good.
Good.
The only bad thing about it, dude, was it was like, it's like pitched for the early part of the season. So like you want it to be cold. It was atrociously hot that day. It was like 90 degrees. And they came and like lit up the like propane fireplace. And I was like,
I don't know about that. Yeah.
no, it's terrible.
The chocolate melted on its own. You didn't even need the
Exactly.
fire.
Just set it down on the concrete, right? All right, number 3. Again, we're all aligned here. Unsurprisingly, Emmanuel Rodriguez, left-handed hitting outfield prospect, 21 years old, likely to start the season at AA. Jeremy, I'm calling you out. This is your last chance to get on board the Erod train. He hit a 114-mile-per-hour tank off Craig Kimbrell yesterday in spring training. So my same question for both of you, and I think this is a much more interesting one to discuss maybe than Walker Jenkins, right, is Erod has this range right now where his like high as a prospect is somewhere in the 20s. I think Prospects Live maybe has him somewhere in the 20s, and his low is like around 70. So he's in this from like second quartile to third quartile, like spanning that entire range. Where does Erod rank among baseball's top 100 prospects at the end of 2024? Anyone want to take that on?
Yeah, I'll start because I'll tell you. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that you're so right, and I hope that I'm terribly wrong. And I hope he's an all-star, and I hope he's great and the best player ever. I hope he's a Hall of Famer. But I just, like I've said, I get the Oswaldo Arcia vibe, and that scares me. And I think that by the end of the year, he'll either be a consensus top 15 prospect or he won't be on top 100s. Like,
Dang.
It's one or the other.
Theo, you're like the tiebreaker here. So I'm nervous.
I'm going to be playing the neutral role, as in I hear both of you out. I see both of your like favoritisms or concerns with him. I think he remains a top 50. I'm not going to say where. I mean, obviously, the jump from high A to double A is the hardest in all of the minor leagues, so we got to see how he plays out. And I am more with Jeremy. I don't know how he's going to adjust him. I mean, Wichita's warmer than Cedar Rapids in the earlier months, but we'll see how the first couple months of the season goes and where he's at by Memorial Day before I make a final conclusion. I have optimism, and I hope Jeremy's wrong too, but I also see where his concerns are coming from. So I at least have hope that he'll remain a top 50 prospect no matter how his 2021 season plays out. And I think best case scenario, he's definitely going to be in St. Paul by August so that Walker Jenkins can get to Wichita by then.
Mm-hmm.
Theo plays the role of politician better than
that was very good. That was very good. But do you know why Theo's right, Jeremy, and you're wrong about something? Because there's no way Erod is going to lose that magnitude of value from being like, let's call him like a consensus top 40 prospect to being outside the top 100, because his on base skills is so good that he accrues a ton of value in different ways. It's not just whether the hit tool is going to play, right? So like he walked at high A at a 20% rate.
Sure.
As a 20-year-old. Like, even if the 70% contact rate that he had last season, even if that's still a struggle, even if there's still swing and miss in the game, he's going to get on base so much that I just don't see a world in which he falls so far that he's outside of top 100 prospect list at the end of 2024.
Guess we'll see, won't we?
I guess we will. I'll give you a spicy take to finish on Erod. The Twins will have 2 consensus top 10 prospects in baseball next year.
Wow.
Oh, okay. Let's temper our expectations. I would say
Jenkins and who?
Emmanuel Rodriguez.
I know.
I don't think he's going to crack the top 25. I don't like best case scenario. He's 25th best. That's the best I'll go.
See, that's where I differ, because if he does the things to stay where he is, he's going to climb. Like that's the part. Like if he improves the swing and miss a little bit, if he hits for more power, if he shows that he can play center field, like that, there's the big questions. And if he does anything to answer those questions, I could see him being as high as Walker Jenkins. But I think there's more chance of failure.
I hear you on the risk. Here's a final thing I'll say about it. And I know I've said it before, and so I know it's like broken record. The combination of raw power and plate discipline he has is unusual. Like, he put up a max exit velocity in 2023 of 117 miles per hour. That would be like, don't have the numbers to hand, top 10 guys in the majors territory. And he's like 5'11". Like, it is unusual, prodigious in-game power, running at like 400 on base percentage as a 20 and 21-year-old. And I feel really confident about that continuing to provide value in 2024. But that's the beauty of it. We'll get to revisit this conversation and someone will be laughing at someone else. Remains to be seen who.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to speed things up. Now we're going to dig into like a cluster of guys at a time, and we'll kind of highlight some specific folks for each of us to talk about based on preferences, disagreements, so on and so forth. So we'll do 4, 5, and 6. At 4, Theo had Gabriel Gonzalez. Jeremy, you also had Gabriel Gonzalez. I had Marco Raya, right-handed pitcher who finished at AA. At number 5, Theo, you had David Festa, right-handed pitcher. Jeremy, you had Marco Raya, and I also had David Festa at 5th overall. And then 6, Theo, you had right-handed pitcher Corey Lewis. Jeremy, you had David Festa, and then I had Gabriel Gonzalez. So this is really like the first place that we disagree. You guys both have Gonzalez at 4 ahead of Raya. I have Raya and Festa ahead of him. What do y'all like about the Gabriel Gonzalez profile, who of course came over from the Mariners in the Jorge Polanco trade? Anyone want to give Gabriel Gonzalez some love?
Yeah, he's got skills that we just undervalue in today's game, just like the pure contact and hitting. And I know people do not watch our show on YouTube for the sake, and that's why it's a good thing. Jeremy is still blurred out. Our view count is not here. We all have faces for radio. Anyway, or podcasting, that should be more appropriate. Anyway, no, like the bat to ball skills are very good for him. I mean, that 290 average, especially in low A, it really showed. But in his adjustment to high A, it wasn't quite there yet. But I think, his time, he's probably going to have a full season in Cedar Rapids this year. And to have that consistency in playing time and just location and not jumping up between levels, it will really play out well for him. And, one of the top 3 prospects from the Mariners system, who's not quite a consensus top 100, but he's on some lists, but he's like that borderline top 100. I think it's good to have him 4th.
For sure. I think we can safely call him a consensus like 125 guy. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on
that for me, I had a hard time ordering the pitchers as it was. Like I felt pretty confident before Gonzalez came in that I was going to have 4 pitchers at 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I wasn't real like, okay, I feel really strong about this pitcher above this pitcher and this pitcher and this pitcher. And so Gonzalez was kind of in that tier. And I'm like, well, those pitchers are all really close. And I'm not going to put Gonzalez down below them all. So he just goes above them all. 20 years old. I think he's going to be 20 all season, right? And he's going to be at high A. And based on what he did at low A, before he struggled at high A, like I expect him to be really, really good at Fort Myers and push himself up as a young guy in Double A. And I'm getting blurrier. It's not even like
it's weird. It's weird. Again, they're here for our voices, not our looks.
Yeah. So it hasn't happened in weeks, and all of a sudden it's real bad. I even like kind of brushed my hair off to the side today, so I look better. But and that's why I had him at 4. I just couldn't justify putting him below the whole group of pitchers that I keep pretty close together.
Right on. Yeah. All of that's valid, logical. I've looked at Gabriel Gonzalez's data more and more, and I think it's just like a skill set non-preference for me, the type of hitter he is. So I'm trying to like acknowledge a bias of a skill set I don't really like, right? So Theo pointed out his great numbers at low A. I think it was like 348, 403, 530, and he had 9 home runs and 19 doubles in like 70-ish games at low A. Like, you can't get much better than that. He doesn't walk a lot, 6.4%. Doesn't strike out a lot either, which is appealing and like very much like the opposite profile of Erod. So maybe that kind of makes sense. Only struck out 16% of the time. Here are my 2 concerns with him. Doesn't hit the ball super, super hard. 90th percentile exit velocity last year was like around 101 miles per hour. And then the chase rate, y'all, is big, like close to 40%, like high 30s. And so I guess my concern is like, is he going to be able to rein in just expanding the zone and going after pitches that he has no business swinging in? I guess, he'll have a whole season at Cedar Rapids as a young for the level hitter to try and figure that out. But I think that's a difficult gap to close, but who knows? Okay, let's move on to our next cluster of guys. So this is going to be kind of like a choose your own adventure, right? So I'm going to list off 7 through 10 for each of us, and then kind of take it 2 paths. Either like, how did you think about and organize this next group of guys? Like, what was kind of your logic for ranking who where? Or is there one in particular that you want to speak on as someone you're excited to track in 2024? Something specific you're monitoring for one of these guys in 2024? Take it any way you want. So 7, Theo, you have Brandon Winokur, outfielder. Jeremy, you had Corey Lewis. I had Austin Martin. At 8, Theo, you had Austin Martin. Jeremy had Charlie Soto. You're the high man on Charlie Soto. And I had Luke Keeschel, infielder. A lot of 2023 draft representation here. 9, Theo, you had Marco Raya. Jeremy, you had Danny DeAndrade. And I had Tanner Schobel. And then at 10, Theo had Tanner Schobel. Jeremy, you had Austin Martin. And I had Corey Lewis. So... And anyone have a guy they want to talk through, or like, how did you approach that kind of next tier of ranking guys, and what was your kind of logic for doing so?
Well, I would call myself an outlier on having Marco Raya so low compared to so many other people.
Hmm.
But I think the Twins have babied him a little too much in his innings workload, and those results are starting to show for themselves. So I don't know. I would like to see him throw over 100 innings, 120 this season, and if he does, then maybe I would put him in that top five. But I mean, the Twins have not done that with Corey Lewis, and when we talked to Jonas 11 about the season that trio or quartet of guys had down in Cedar Rapids all from the 2022 draft class, I was just a lot more sold on what we heard with him and Corey Lewis, and him not having those same limitations as Marco Raya. And if I will really start to buy into the Marco Raya hype, if they just let him off the leash and let him throw and have a full season at Double A where he's throwing 120, 140 innings.
Yeah. Jeremy, do you think there's reliever risk with Raya?
Well, I think there's always reliever risk in all the starters, right?
Sure.
But the fact that he threw 65 innings and then backed that up by throwing 62 innings, but it's so hard because it's a developmental thing, right? And we're not privy to all the information. And he did have some shoulder stuff, and they're treating him with kid gloves. But the reality is, the kid's 21 years old. He was at Double A.
Mm-hmm.
When he's right, he's easily the best pitcher in the system, in my opinion. When he's right, and he's not always right. But for me, it's like he was my top pitcher, and yeah, I think there's certainly reliever risk, but at 21 years old, you still have time to figure it out. And so I had him at 5, and I think he's the best pitcher. But still, 5 for me, 4 for you, 9 for Theo. That's all kind of the same tier anyway. And so I think we're maybe splitting hairs over something that isn't really that big of a deal.
Yep. Anyone else, Jeremy, in that list, in that chunk of guys who you're particularly excited about for 2024?
Well, I'm the low guy on Austin Martin, which feels funny because when Barrios was getting rumored to go to Toronto, I was all about Austin Martin. And I think there's still something there. And I think he'll debut this year. And I think he'll do some things that surprise people, catch people by surprise, because he's got a different type of profile. But he's going to get on base. He's going to steal bases. He's probably not going to hit home runs. He'll be serviceable, almost in like that Nick Gordon type of way, right? And with Nick Gordon, I think there was a lot of disappointment in that he was such a high draft pick. But once you could get past that, what Nick Gordon did for the team was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And Austin Martin kind of is going to have that same stigma because he was the return for the ace. And so if you can get past that and you can just let him be a Major League Baseball player on a good team and let him do his thing, I think there's going to be value added when he's on the roster. And I think he'll have a good career. It's just not going to be maybe the career that we thought when he was at Vanderbilt. And I didn't think I'd be the high guy on Charlie Soto, but like I said, I kind of lump all those pitchers together, and they could be in any direction for me.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to Soto because he has an interesting range in our ranking. So we'll definitely touch on him later.
Well, before we knew the next one, who's the standout on your list here, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm gonna go for Luke Keeschel. Definitely been high on him, like pretty much since the jump. I think like I'll live on this one forever, Jeremy. But you're not blurry. Congrats. I'll live on this one forever. But I like tweeted that he was kind of like a Twinsy-ish profile in May before the 23 draft, and he's another guy I took a big like jump into, and his data is really interesting. So he small sample, right? At low A, walked a lot, 13%, didn't strike out much, 18%, really good average exit velocity around 90 miles an hour, low chase rate, good contact, and then barreled like 23-ish% of pitches. And that's just like, there's no real holes in that offensive approach in that skill set. And so I think a lot of people, and maybe Jeremy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think a lot of people, when the Twins made that pick, right after Jenkins and Soto, they're like, a college infielder, that's not as
Yeah.
exciting. And I 100% agree with that. But the skill set is pretty solid, and I think he's going to make pretty quick work of the lower levels of the minors, and I'm excited to see him in 24.
Yeah, that's the feeling that I had, and I think the feeling on Keishel would maybe be stronger had he played more than 8 games at high A, because he was really good.
Yep.
In those 8 games at high A, and so he's the type of guy that could take that jump, because he played more positions than I think we expected him to play. But him and Schobel, I mean, you have those guys 8, 9. Theo has them 10 and 12. I have them 11 and 12. Like, they're the very similar prospects. I think it was a similar feeling too when they were drafted, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of them is going to become the clearly better prospect, I think. And it's just it's weird because there's so many parallels between so many prospects, and I don't remember it always being like that, but it's like you have a guy and then you have a similar guy that's the level below. And
Yep.
so yeah, I'm curious to see, because it's like he's gonna play at a level, high A probably to start, but he's not gonna need to be there long if he gets it done. And then all of a sudden he's at double A, essentially knocking on the door, right?
Yep, I would think so. And so that brings something that I wanted to ask you guys, because we've all ranked these guys like similarly, right? Kind of, you can pick 1A and 1B, Schobel and Keishel, like however you want to organize them. But Schobel had followed a similar path where he absolutely crushed high A, and then moved up to double A roughly halfway through last season, maybe a little later, and really struggled. So I guess my question, like, we know that transition is difficult. My question to you guys is, when you're creating a list like this, how much do you allow that struggle at a new level to influence your ranking? Or do you try and kind of let it go as like players need time to adjust to a new level, to new kind of skill sets in their development? Or do you think of it as like more impactful? No, like, this is a real speed bump. This is a challenge. This is something that's more concerning for me long term when you're creating a list.
I think for me personally, if my like personal trajectory on that prospect is already pointing down, moving up a level and struggling only makes it go down faster, right? Mm-hmm. If my personal feelings about the prospect is the opposite, I'm like, let's see how they do next year, right? And so I think with Schobel already, I was like, well, didn't love him, struggled. Well, that makes sense. And so I think Keishel's kind of that same type of prospect for me. He's just a year behind. And that's why I think I had Schobel one spot higher, whether that's 11 and 12 or really 14 or 15. MLB's new rankings had Keishel 9 and Schobel 10. So all 4 of us were very much like these 2 guys, right? Mm-hmm. And when you see that small sample, at least for me, I'm not going to make a huge deal out of it unless I feel like I really saw it coming. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, yep, prospect status down.
That's fair. Theo, how about you? What are your thoughts on?
No, I mean, they're such similar players that one or the other is definitely going to pan out and have a longevity major league career. One might have a shorter career, but yeah, what Schobel's adjustment was in double A, I mean, he was still hitting above the Mendoza line. It was not a Jose Salas type of thing. And I know I'm going to keep using him as an example of like the extreme drop off, but that's what he was this last year. And Schobel, 46 games, 226 batting average in double A. And I think the OPS was 776? No, that was the season OPS. 634. Okay. So not fantastic, but again, greatest jump. Try again next season. He's going to start the season double A. I mean, we've seen crazier things happen. He's not on any of our lists, but remember what happened to Anthony Prado when he made his jump from double A to triple A.
That's right. That's right. A story that
I think I know those cases. I follow them, so it's not something I'm going to be concerned about. And Prado is an exception to the rule, but you never know how it's going to play out for these guys. So you can't put too much stock unless you're Jose Salas. And I'm sorry, I keep beating the dead horse with them. I do not dislike
Jeez, lay off
Salas.
Jose Salas.
I do not dislike him, but it's the facts. So.
Yep, for sure. I think that's sound logic. All right, 11. Theo and I were aligned on our 11th ranked prospect. We both had CJ Culpepper. Jeremy, you had Schobel here. You had CJ Culpepper down in 15th. You are the low man here, Jeremy. Without putting you on the spot too much, is this something you don't love about his profile, or well, you have him ranked a little lower than us? What gives, man?
And there's not, like, this isn't the Emmanuel Rodriguez case where I have something that I really don't like about him. I've said before, like, I would talk about Corey Lewis and I'd be told, yeah, well, how about CJ Culpepper? And really it's that same tier with the Winnikers, with Schobel and Keishel, and then CJ Culpepper. And so I think they're all kind of in that next tier. And if you would have had Culpepper at 10, I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. You have Culpepper at 15. I'm like, yep, that makes sense. I'm curious to see. He struggled a little bit moving from Fort Myers to Cedar Rapids, and that's not the huge jump, right? That's should be the easy jump. It's not that he struggled a ton. He struck out 36 and 39 innings, but his WHIP went from 1.01 to 1.41, and that could have been just tiring out potentially. But it's like, you're a college guy that he threw 86 innings, so it wasn't that he threw an absolute ton. I just know that there's a lot of people in the organization that really like him. And so Culpepper may very well put himself in the conversation with the other pitching prospects to be the top prospect in the organization as far as pitching goes. So I don't think I'm necessarily down on him. I just had him lower in the tier and you guys had him at the top.
Yeah. A couple quick things on Culpepper. That's a bet I guess I'm making, Jeremy, is like he wore down fatigue, and I think Jonas Levin spoke on that a little bit, but I could have also just made that up in my head. But I think I do have like kind of a strong take on Culpepper. I think he's the most likely of the 2022 draft arms to stick as a big league starter. Like the scope of the pitch mix, he has 2 fastballs, good velocity. His 90th percentile velocity on his 4-seamer was 96 miles an hour. Like, that's gonna play. A 2-seamer with up to 19 inches of run that generated like a 78% ground ball rate. I think he has the arsenal to play as a big league starter out of any of those 4 guys at the moment. But I do think, like, we've talked a lot about this. We saw those guys really like literally move up as kind of an entire rotation together. I would think that 2024 will finally be the time where we start to see some separation between Lewis and Culpepper and Zebby Matthews and Andrew Morris, right?
Yep, for sure.
Talking about racing terms, I mean, they're in that home stretch where everyone's close together, but they're going to get that home stretch, and someone else is definitely going to be ahead of the others. I think one of that group is definitely going to be in St. Paul by the end of this year, but we're all going to differentiate and just wait and see. I think it's too early to call which of those guys is going to be making it there.
For sure. Definitely an interesting group to track. All right, let's dig into 12 and 13. 12, so Theo, you had Luke Keishel here. So did you, Jeremy. I had Charlie Soto, right-handed pitcher, at 13. Theo, you had Danny DeAndrade, infield prospect. Jeremy, you had Brandon Winokur, and I had Matt Cancerino, who it has been really wonderful to see him pitching again. Sidebar. You guys are both a little bit higher than Danny DeAndrade than I am, and I think you guys are probably right, and I'm probably not. Although I also think we're kind of splitting hairs in this teen range. Any of you guys want to speak a little bit on what it is that you like about his profile so much?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I had him at 9, kind of at the top of that. For me, the third tier, and so I guess from from my perspective, I did a weekly thing last year for Twins Daily on Sunday night, so I kind of recapped the week.
Mm.
And he was always the guy at Fort Myers where I was like, huh, Danny D'Andrade had a really good week again. And there wasn't a ton of guys that you just consistently saw their names every week, and his was there. Now he statistically wasn't great. 244, 750 OPS, not bad. 21 doubles, 11 home runs. Like he was just a name that always stuck out, and he was playing shortstop. Like so, you're putting a guy at shortstop quite a bit. 105 games, so he was the regular there for the most part. And it's like the guy has value and young too. I mean, 19 years old now. So I just think there's a solid young prospect in that weekly report where I'm like, hey, he's just getting it done week after week after week. He'll go to Cedar Rapids and we'll see how he does in a colder atmosphere. But I think there's certainly the tools there for him to be a top 5, 6, 7 prospect in the organization this time next year.
He's not the same type of defender Noah Miller is. No one is, but he can hit, and Noah Miller can't really.
Nope.
And that's why a better balanced version, and that's why it's good that the Twins kept on to him. And I'm sure he might have been a more appealing trade acquisition for the Dodgers, but the Dodgers have such a strong system at developing hitters that I'm not saying Noah Miller's going to hit 300 for his career, but he will get to where Danny D'Andrade is now, I think, at a major league level.
Yeah, I like that comp actually because the word on D'Andrade is right, like he's a good defender at short, but definitely a much stronger offensive profile than Miller for sure. Okay, let's dig into the next three guys. Apparently, I made an error here. Good times. 14, Theo, you had Zebby Matthews, right-handed pitcher, part of the cluster of 2022 guys. Jeremy, you did in fact include Matt Cantorino on your list.
Sure.
I have Brandon Winokur. We'll glide on by that mistake. 15, Theo, you had Matt Cantorino. Jeremy, you had CJ Culpepper here, and I had D'Andrade up 15. And then 16, Theo and I are aligned here, which I think is kind of unusual further down the rankings. We both ranked Ricardo Olivar here. I'm going to call him an outfielder who spent 2023 at Fort Myers. Jeremy, there's a guy I want to ask you about because I'm sensing the love that you have for Tanner Hall because you bring him up wherever possible. You ranked him as 16th best. Did not get a chance to see him make his pro debut last season. But why are you so excited about Hall?
So for me, the 15 was kind of the end of that tier, right? That third tier. And then this next tier is kind of the big bulky tier. And Tanner Hall's profile coming into the draft was maybe one of the best changeups in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Great command, but lacked velocity. And knowing what we knew about the Twins and their developmental group, the velocity was going to come. So if you can add velocity to the great changeup and the command, you are going to have something like you had in this group of 2022 draft picks, right? And we haven't really heard much from Hall yet this year. We've seen it with some other guys that were drafted last year, but not Hall. But I wasn't going to back off kind of where I was. These are my rankings from when I sent them in January with one minor tweak. And so I'm curious to see, if Hall doesn't break 90, he's going to fall off that list in a hurry. I just don't have any information that says that he hasn't added velocity, and I'm confident that he will. And he's not going to be 16 if he's added velocity. He's going to move up into that next group.
Right on. I dig it. Twins player development. We need some Tanner Hall footage, please, to satiate Jeremy. Okay, 17. Theo, you and I are aligned here again, man. We both had Kalai Rosario, outfielder who spent 2023 at Cedar Rapids. Jeremy, you had Jose Rodriguez, who I'm going to ask you about in a second. Theo, what are your thoughts on Rosario, man? I mean, he had like a really exceptional 2023 season. Yeah, what draws you to him? What do you think about his prospects moving forwards?
I mean, it was much more acceptable than what he had in 2022 down in Fort Myers. There was progression. There was a good jump. Nothing to put him in that top 15 quite yet, but he's an outlier. And, I think he's going to see time both in I think he's going to start the season in Cedar Rapids, but I think by that point he's going to be joining Double A by, I'd say, June, if all goes well. And I'm excited to see where that development can further him if all goes well. And if there's a setback, then there is reason to be concerned. But I mean, just great bat to ball skills and a lot more patience at the plate.
Yeah. Rosario is going to be an interesting one for sure. Jeremy, okay, here's my question for you, man, because I left the international guys off my top 20 pretty much. Definitely the new guys that just signed in the January period, but pretty much like uniformly, a lot of the Twins guys who played their first year of professional ball in the United States in 2023 had poor years. I'm thinking of like Yasser Mercedes, so on and so forth. How do you think about ranking those guys? Because it feels kind of unreasonable to judge them on a first pro season in the US, like different country, different culture, all of that. How do you figure out how to incorporate those guys in your rankings? Because I took the easy route and I was just like, nah, I'm not.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair thing to do. But I think whenever you sign kind of those, and like when we talked to Ben Badler, it's hard to know exactly how to rank guys because they don't even rank them by talent; they rank them by bonus. But you kind of you get the sense of who the big bonus guys are. And those big bonus guys typically are going to be in a team's top 30, right? Independent of how that organization, the depth of that organization. And so I think Mercedes and Rodriguez and on the tail end of that, Acuna a little bit, we're going to be top 30-ish guys. And Rodriguez, for me, was lower than Mercedes to start last year. I thought Rodriguez performed better. And so I had Rodriguez at I believe he was 16 on my list in January, and Mercedes was like 22. I did move Canarino up, and I moved Gonzalez in. So maybe he was a little bit higher even than that. But I think that's a fair place to do it. And when I put the new guys in, they're going to be in that teen spot because I think that's a fair place to start them because the ceilings are so high. But if they don't do anything to approach that ceiling, even like here's the ceiling, right? And here's where they start. If they don't even make any bump at all, then they start to fall off. But I think you got to be patient with these guys because we talked about it, right? New country, new language, don't know anything. Like this isn't just baseball. This is trying to figure out the life part of things. And so I think this year, still at the same academy, just playing at a little bit higher level, but maybe not playing in the heat of the day all the time too, might help these guys out. So I try to give them a little bit of leeway, but I did drop them just because they, on a whole, were pretty terrible last year as a collective group.
Yep. There has to be a bounce back candidate in the international cluster for 2024. Excited to figure out who that is. All right, Theo, I got a question for you. So 18. Theo, you had Charlie Soto here. Jeremy, you had Simeon Woods Richardson, who's looked really solid. Definitely a velo jump in the early going in spring training. I had Unia Severino. Theo, you're the low man on Charlie Soto. Any thoughts, any strong opinions, or just like a function of other rankings rather than you're not higher on Charlie Soto?
I'm just not high on him because we've seen nothing from him yet, aside from what we've seen in spring training, no pro games. But I also want to share a cautionary tale of who he reminds me of. My old high school classmate, Sam Carlson, who was drafted 55th overall by the Seattle Mariners in 2017. Sam got to throw a couple games in 2017. Just 2, and then he got Tommy John. And he did not pitch for 3 whole years. Now, one of them was out of his control with 2020, and pretty much being 22 years old and only pitching 2 games in your entire professional career, that's after being drafted out of high school. Not good. Now, Sam was let go by the Mariners and is now a full-time reliever. Hasn't pitched above high A at age 24. And he's with the Brewers system, and I do hope he does turn himself around and get a chance to be a part of their bullpen. And the Brewers have definitely had the opportunities to change guys into even short-term successful relievers, and I think that's a great opportunity for him ahead. Charlie Soto does give me some reminders because his velocity is outstanding for his age, but I've seen it happen firsthand. And I remember when Sam got drafted, I was telling my high school classmates, I don't know, I think there's a good chance he gets injured. And I think I'm just taking cautionary approach with Charlie Soto, possibly because of how hard he throws and how young his arm still is. And he's a big kid for just turning 18, but his body's still going to be developing, and I just don't know how that's going to respond to throwing 100 miles per hour on a consistent basis. So I think he is my Emmanuel Rodriguez to compare it to Jeremy's case. I want to be wrong. I really want to be proven wrong, but until otherwise, I just don't want to really get too excited about him yet, because MLB.com back in 2017 had Sam Carlson ranked the 15th best prospect in the draft. They had him higher than Jake Berger, old friend Blaine Enlow, and much, much higher than one of the favorite NL Cy Young candidates, Spencer Strider. So,
right on.
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen for sure. I'm gonna give the optimistic version for Soto, right? So I just think Soto's interesting because we have him at 6, 12, and 18 respectively on our lists, and I think a big part of that is it's reflective of the fact that we haven't seen him pitch in a professional game yet, right? And we talked a little bit about that with Hall, Jeremy, who you're like, I like the change up, if he can add some velocity, so on and so forth. Some notes about Soto that I think are relevant. I think there's actually some really striking similarities between Soto and Chase Petty, the pitcher that the Twins traded to the Reds for Sonny Gray. A lot of velocity. Soto has 2 fastballs, a 4-seamer and a 2-seamer with just like a ton of movement. If you check out some of the Twins player development clips, like the 2-seamer is super legit. Power slider and a changeup. Someone asked me on Twitter this week, like, what his velocity ceiling is. And I do, Theo, I think you're like, right. I think it's going to be like
over 100 miles per hour. Yeah.
Right. So 100 miles an hour. Here's my like headline on him that I would say, if he's healthy and has an even like a relatively effective year, I think he will easily be the best pitching prospect in the organization. For me, I need to see him like pitch in a game. And as soon as he does it effectively, I'll be jumping him up. But I would come back to a Keith Law tweet about Soto, which I think is interesting, which is pre-draft, right? He basically said someone asked him in a chat about Charlie Soto's profile and basically said, if a pitcher had Soto's stuff and velocity and body at 21, he would be a top 10 pick easily. Which I found interesting and something I made note on. So, Jeremy, I guess you're going to be the tiebreaker here, man. What's your 2 cents on Charlie Soto? Optimistic, feeling good about it. What's the outlook for 2024 from your perspective?
I mean, I was the high guy on him, so it would be kind of silly for me to not be optimistic, right? Throws it hard. Like he's the guy that you would build if you wanted to build the prototypical pitcher, and you're doing it at 18 years old. So is he going to be on the Mark Araya track where he's throwing less innings? Probably. But if you can just take a step a year, he's going to be a big leaguer at 22 years old and have everything that you could possibly want. And I think you're right. If he does what he's potentially capable of doing, he is the top pitching prospect because he's 6'4" or whatever he is, and he's 18 years old. Like, what more do you want out of him? So, again, with pitching prospects, though, it can all go real bad in a hurry. I mean, I think of some of the guys that I've drafted in fantasy baseball that were going to be the next big thing, right? Nate Pearson, next big thing. Forrest Whitley, next big thing. And it just never pans out. So there's always going to be some risk. But yeah, there's so much to like about him that I'm optimistic, but you got to see him do it. And I don't think because he hasn't done it that I drop him all the way to 18, but maybe 6 is too high as well. So maybe you're right on, Jamie, with number 12.
First time for everything. Okay, quickly, 2 more guys. Then I want to ask you guys one more question before we get out of here. So I want to make sure we round out the top 20. Theo, you have Junior Severino. Jeremy and I both have Connor Prelip. I just had to include him because what if healthy? I know that's like a huge if at this point. It's pretty undeniable stuff. And then 20, we all had Pearson. I think we can say friend of the show, Pearson Ole. Who was one of the best pitchers in AA in the second half last season. Excited to see where 2024 takes him. So we've done this for the Cubs and the Brewers, and I want to make sure I ask you guys this question too about the Twins system. So you can take it any way you want. Either like most under the radar prospect that you didn't get to talk about. Maybe someone who didn't make your top 20, or just prospect you are most excited to watch and track and see play baseball in 2024. Anyone have a good answer for this one?
Well, he made my list, but not your guys' list. That'd be Matthews. I really, really like his stuff. I really liked how he was able to develop that sweeper in the minors this season, and I don't think he's going to be the one to make the majors or even make it to AAA out of that group, but I really just want to track him and see how his season progresses.
Love that.
Jamie, tell us yours because I want to hedge my bets here.
I came in like not with an answer for this. Okay, I got a good one. Here's mine. Dylan Questad is going to be mine. 2023 5th round pick, I want to say. Wisconsin prepster, was like, 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 4 picks the Twins had that were prep players, just to kind of go against that narrative. Kind of an undersized starter type. There's actually been some footage, I think, of him on the Twins player development Twitter this spring. Fastball up to like 96. He kind of has like a short arm, a little bit of like a Lucas Giolito type throwing motion. But he had really good stuff. I think it was the Arkansas commit before the Twins managed to sign him away. And he's just someone that no one's talks about, right? So I'm always going to lean into the pitchers on the under the radar guys because all of those guys went to Instructs. None of them pitched in a pro game. And I'm excited to see all of them. Jack Doherty's another guy from Ole Miss who was a later pick, 7th, 8th, or 9th round. I forget which, but he's been throwing like 97 mile an hour fastballs, and he was sitting like low 90s in college in the SEC. So any of the 2023 pitchers, I guess, is my answer. How about you, Jeremy?
So you mentioned Connor Prelip. We both had him at 19. And he's not really going to be an under the radar prospect because he's going to spend 2024 completely off the radar, right? And then he hopefully will bounce back. I mean, he's thrown all of 30 innings in the last handful of years. But so he's someone to just keep on the radar because he's going to be off the radar. Matt Canarino being back on the radar is huge.
Love it.
So he wouldn't necessarily be my under the radar guy, but he's a guy that I think we're going to have to put squarely back on the radar that's been off. But Simeon Woods Richardson is my dude that's flown under the radar that I think is going to make an impact this year with the Twins. I don't know if that's as the spot starter, the 5th starter, maybe if that position's open, or if it's going to be the guy that pitches in long relief and kind of does the Brett Hedrick thing this year, and then kind of finds a role. But if this velocity thing is real, and you just mentioned spring training, blah, is there more there that he could maybe shorten things up and become a reliever? Because the thing with Woods Richardson is he's still super young. and we forget about that. And he bounced around and he did the Olympics and he got traded and he got traded again. And I just think there's maybe he's kind of fallen off for reasons that he couldn't necessarily control. The other name, and I don't have this name, and you maybe do. We talked about the player development Twitter. Their first tweet at the spring training was of a guy that is not on the radar, right? Who is that guy? Who is that
I'm
pitcher?
looking it up.
He's a Latin pitcher with a nasty sweeper. That's who you're talking about.
Yeah. Like maybe that's some that has to be like because when
Alejandro, he's the guy they got from the Angels for Gio Urshela. Alejandro Crisomoto?
No, because I thought that was Hidalgo.
No, that's Hidalgo. Yeah, but Alejandro Crisomoto might be the other guy you were talking about.
That's what I'm talking about, but that's not the guy that came for Urshela. Like so, this
No,
guy
you're right.
shows up,
Hidalgo's
like I feel like, and maybe this is just me reading too into things. If the Twins player development Twitter, who is highlighting the Walker Jenkins, the Charlie Sotos, the Jack Geordys, the draft picks, their first guy was a guy that's definitely not on our radar, right? And what he's doing is nasty.
Yeah,
like
that stuff's crazy.
How about a broken bat? How about that one where
that sweeper was ridiculous?
He's gonna hit a guy in the chest and the guy's gonna swing and miss.
Yeah, I do remember that. I do remember that video doing the rounds and people kind of freaking out because like no one has heard of this guy and the stuff is like absolutely nasty. That 100%, like guys popping up like that we have never heard of, or were like, guys that signed in international prospect window like a couple of years ago for almost no money that suddenly becomes something interesting for sure. That's a great one. Good shout.
And for me, that's what we're about, right?
Yep. And
so seeing that, it's like, let's draw attention to this guy because it's impressive. And maybe he'll be nothing. Maybe it's going to be like I can't even think of the guy's name. The guy that was signed on independent ball, throwing 102 miles an hour, and Brandon Paulson. Remember that story?
No, I don't.
We will talk about that on the next one, because that's the thing. Like you think you find this guy, and all of a sudden it's like didn't work out, but it's worth a shot. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of prospects that are under the radar, and we just got to try to keep them on people's radars because that's what we're trying to do here.
That's what we're here for, yeah.
Yes, sirs. Okay, that will do us for today. Hope folks enjoyed this kind of bumper Twins Top 20 episode. Super fun digging into all of these guys. We'll be back with another episode 28 next week. And this is going to be, Jeremy, our first draft specific episode. I think we are planning on doing a overview of the 2024 draft class, early season edition, talk about some of the demos, things we like, things we don't like, interesting prospects, all of that good stuff. So if you're in it for the draft content, next week is going to be a fun one.
It's also going to be a learning one for me to see how much you guys put it, and you guys do put in a lot of effort, but just to see it firsthand and listen to it firsthand so I can actually understand the draft better than ever before, even if it's a meeker class compared to last year.
Heck,
Jamie's going to come through with lots of draft content. I'll be able to tell you all about the girls' state basketball tournament. So.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, we got a good balanced content for next week, so we got all that to look forward to.
Absolutely,
something for everybody. All right, thank you guys so much for checking out the show. Remember to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next week, we'll see you.